movies are illusions, and they depend on the audience giving all the emotion that happens in a movie, the interest, everything, all comes out of the audience. So the illusion depends on a narrow bunch of rules that they think a film must have. You have to realize that today they've spent hundreds of millions of pounds to get you addicted to a certain type, the way you would be addicted to a potato chip, that there's only one kind of movie, and it's the movie that you've been programmed to see. But cinema is much broader than that. And ultimately, I would like to ask my colleague here a question. Are movies an art or a business?
Okay. Can I ask you a question about archaeology?
Okay.
Can I say they're a science? Okay, I think movies are a science. And I got the proof here. This is the booklet that you gave me the other night, where you've gone through a piece of work, one of many that I understand Megalopolis drew from.
Which you wrote.
Which I co-wrote with
Yes.
my friend David Wengrow, and you've gone through it and you've analyzed it, and I assume you've done that for a number of other texts, and that's a scientific procedure. And I take what you're saying, what you were saying slightly earlier, to mean that there is a certain paradigm of cinema which renders some aspects of what we're going to see difficult to read for audiences.
Yeah, if it doesn't play by the accepted rules of the day, then it becomes depends on the willingness of the audience to go with it with an open mind.
One of the things that struck me when I have the advantage of having seen the movie with my son the other day, I can see that, and I can also see that the movie is illegible in a way that could potentially break or challenge that existing paradigm. And that's where I see a lot of the connections actually to the parts of our work that you've picked out here, because I think to me partly what the movie does is confront you with something which is not confined to any one genre. It's true for cinema goers, it's true for higher education, it's true for many fields, that in some way, which is hard to define, we've become stuck in a particular way of doing things. And to me, what the movie really encapsulated is actually the very first words of our book. It's what the ancient Greeks referred to as kairos. It's the idea that somewhere in that particular trajectory you're on, a little window opens up, a window of opportunity where you can just start playing games with the underlying symbols. Carl Jung called it the metamorphosis of the gods. And I think there's a lot of that in this film that we're going to see, particularly with your main character, the character of Caesar, who to my mind becomes Hamlet. Caesar becomes Hamlet. We don't want to give too much away, but that to me was quite shocking.
Well, it was shocking when you saw that?
Yeah, I don't want to talk about the moment in the film that stunned me the most, because that would be...
I suppose you're wondering why I came here dressed like Cary Grant. That was to please you. But, you know, Gaze, what we're really saying is that people are scared of too much freedom. If they like to be bounded with a narrative has a boundary that you can see it in context with something and enjoy it on that basis. And I've tried to make a film that has no boundaries. That in other words, I don't believe that cinema is always the same. Which is good. If my first question, if you're in the business of cinema, it's good if you have something that's like Coca-Cola, that the audience already knows what the rules are. You give them something. People are scared when you give them too much freedom. They want to be held in boundaries, and maybe this is what's going on in the world today. I don't know. The thought is more comfortable when it's limited, I think.
I read a few responses, to your movie including critical responses. And somewhere in our correspondence earlier in the week, you mentioned this fascinating character, a scholar of the 15th century. Some people identify with the beginnings of the Renaissance.
Basically, what I believe, all of you here, you're all my cousins. We're all one human family, and we're Homo sapiens. We've existed about 300,000 years. For sure, the last 10,000 years we have had recorded history, and things have been run by patriarchy. There's speculation in your book that most of the human Homo sapien existence, we were not in patriarchs, or the kings were more evident because they were dead and we found some tombs, but that we possibly were in matriarchies. Don't you say
people
that?
are afraid of that question. I mean, it's almost an intellectual offense to even go looking for evidence of matriarchal or matrifocal
what you mentioned before is that, number one, we're cousins, I think. Number two, I mean, how do you deny that Homo sapien is a genius species? There are other intelligent creatures. We know do you say octopi or octopuses? I'll say octopuses. We know they're intelligent. Sure. Pigs are intelligent. There's lots of intelligent creatures, but nothing on the order of the Homo sapien. I mean, we can analyze the genome and splice it. We can send crafts to photograph Mars. We can manipulate particles and do these extraordinary things. The answer I get when I say, well, aren't we geniuses? They say, yeah, but we do bad things too. But that's not answering whether we're geniuses or not. That's whether or not there are reasons why we do bad things too. So if you agree that we're really geniuses, but how can you not? Then you wonder, well, why do we allow ourselves sometimes to be sheared like sheep if we're such extraordinary creatures? Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, there's probably 8 trillion pounds a year spent on advertising. And what is advertising if not selling a little bit of happiness? And you wouldn't be able to sell it if the people were happy because they already have it. So there must be some reason that we're kept unhappy deliberately because it's good for business. That's what I think. So this, by the way, was said by Pico della Mirandola, who was a 14th century Italian.
Yeah, he got killed for it.
Well,
initially I believe his work, it's 1486 or something, on human dignity.
Yeah, the Oration of Human Dignity, which said the very same thing that this movie says. We are geniuses. There's no problem the earth faces that we can't solve. Just let us come together and do it.
I think it was the first book that was ever universally banned by the church, which in the 15th century is probably the equivalent of being universally panned by the critics.
It's the only time in history anyone has ever come out and said, we human beings are geniuses.
Right.
And he died, he was 31 when he died.
Yeah, which if you calibrate it for 15th century mortality rates is probably the same age as my friend, who was 59.
David Graeber, who made many beautiful books, and basically everything I put in this movie I learned from my family of geniuses on whose shoulders we all stand, you know.
Did you know, by the way, that they actually exhumed the body of Pico?
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah, more than 5 centuries after he died, from the San Marco church in Florence to establish the cause of death. Arsenic poisoning.
Wow. That's just like Napoleon.
Yeah, some of them blame the Medici, but we're getting off topic.
Okay. But the point is this, that if all this movie says, I'm not interested in anything about a future for you young people and your children. That's all I want. That's the prize for me for this film. My dream of this, I told you what my dream was, that every New Year, because this film ends with a lot of hope and positive energy on New Year's Eve, and my dream is that this film will be shown every New Year's, and when you go home after seeing it, you're going to home and not say, well, I'm going to give up smoking or I'm going to give up eating too much, but instead ask one question: is the society we're in the only one available to us? We're in need of a debate about the future, and we want everyone in the world to be in on the debate, and we want all the questions to be allowed to be asked. I mean, do commercials help promote bad mental health? I mean, if you tell someone subliminally all over and over and over again that they're not okay unless they have a Mercedes, does that make him feel unfulfilled and like, oh, I'll never have a Mercedes? That's all I'm saying, really, with this movie, I think, is let's leap into the future as a genius family and not be afraid.
I read something about this movie which said that it presents a utopia, a utopian vision. I personally don't think that's the case. And it's something that critics have said about our book, and I don't think that's the case either. But there is an image in your movie, which I noticed is also in the trailer, so we're not giving anything away here. But I think it encapsulates perfectly what's really going on, at least to my mind, in both cases. And it's an image of a tree. And the trunk of the tree, it's annotated, right? It has
The
words.
trunk of the tree is Homo sapien.
The trunk of the tree is
300,000 years of history.
Us as a species. And then most of the branches of the tree go up, and they're empty. There are no words in them. All the words are crammed, right, into one trunk, which is very overburdened. It's sort of
Which is
creaking.
called civilization, because that's the 10,000 years we've had writing.
Exactly. And then, hanging off this one decrepit branch, which has the word civilization, are some other words like inequality,
War,
slavery,
cruelty.
war.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The American Emerson said that humanity was going to be destroyed by civilization.
Uh-huh.
That's what that tree tries to say.
That's it to me, because it's only when you see the other branches that window opens up, and I can't recall which character it is in the movie who puts it that particular way. Is what we have now the only thing that's available to us as a species? That's the question, to my mind, that the movie is really
If we talk
posing.
about it, if we talk about it every New Year's, of course, we'll come to ideas. And this is beyond politics. I made a film with people in the film, in this cast are of every possible persuasion politically. There's people on the side of one candidate, people on the side of other, people who've been canceled, people who should be canceled, all kinds of people. But we made it together, playing together. That's something we both say in our work, is human beings who are at their best when they play with their kids. I mean, that's where everything gets invented. Well, what's that wonderful thing I read in your book, that the real meaning of family is from a German word that means friend?
The real meaning of freedom
Freedom.
shares a root with the word for friend. Freedom and friend in Indo-European languages and Germanic languages. The word for family shares another root, which is also interesting, but in a darker sense. It comes from the Latin root for famulus, which means a house slave, which is kind of intriguing that even our word for family contains the germ of slavery.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, our human heritage is so fascinating, and of course, the idea that cinema is this narrow thing that gets everyone to view it as if it's is it or not a hit or a flop, which is another way of saying, is it a Marvel picture or is it going to be an art picture? I mean, it's what it comes down to. But no, there's I think this is a joyous moment in time, because things in the world are what's happening to our planet, what's happening in generally the divisions between the world. It's time, it's time to talk about it and to use our great talent to solve the problem, which we're capable of doing. I mean, the problems of today, how many children are dying every day? People would say, well, that's not acceptable. It's not only not acceptable, it's not necessary. What's going on is not necessary today. We can be above it, and we can solve these problems beautifully with the talent we've been given, which I think is, as you've heard from both of us, is extraordinary.
And I think another kind of thread that runs through, at least my reading of the film, is really about how one gets to a situation where the power drive, the libido of a few men can actually take control of whole populations. And
Demagogues.
The demagogues, Crassus.
They're the ones who say those people we're great, but those people are animals, or those people are not. We're all great. We're all related. We're all capable of solving any problem put in front of us. So I say, let's do it. That's why I made the film. I'm not only a grandfather, I'm a great grandfather. I believe that, your children are your jewels. The grandchildren are dividends, but the great grandchildren is immortality itself. And I want the world to be beautiful for these kids. I'm fine. I'm comfortable with. I don't want to. I'm not like Faust. I don't want to be young. But I want the young people to have a beautiful world when I'm gone, and that's what I'm trying to say in this movie.
I think that's very clear in the final image that you leave us with at the close of Megalopolis, which we'll get to before long.
Well, megalopolis means, giant city. So, well, certainly London is a megalopolis, but New York, Boston, and I mean, we have examples of these giant cities. That's where the title came from, not from the film Metropolis. A lot of people think, well, is this a remake of Metropolis? I like Metropolis, but no, this is not. This film is. Oh, it has something in it from every movie I ever loved, from the first movie I ever saw as a kid, which was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. I'll never forget. I was 4 years old and I saw that, and I thought Snow White was the most wonderful princess I could imagine. And the mother, the evil queen, when she was not being a witch, she was pretty interesting too. Funny. No, actually, I wasn't making. I made a film you might have seen called John Grisham's The Rainmaker, and after that, I just took. I wanted to take 10 years off and see, what I could learn if I wasn't a professional film director. I went to different countries. I just sort of experimented a lot with acting because, as you probably know, in the movie business, actors are paid the same whether they rehearse or not. So consequently, you never get to rehearse. And there's a beautiful thing, those of you who know theater, where you rehearse without just doing the text, but doing improvisations and other techniques that bring about. And I learned a lot about that, and I tried to use a lot of that in this film. So yes, that's. I wasn't really working on this for 40 years, but I was working on trying to understand who I was as a film. Now I know that I'm a person who takes things to the brink, right on the point of disaster, and is most comfortable there, which any other filmmaker would say is a little nutty, but it's what I've done my whole life. It's the same happen. You know the movie Apocalypse Now. You know who owns it? I do. You know why I own it? I own it because nobody wanted it. I had made the two Godfather films, which made a lot of money for Paramount and had won a lot of awards. But when I said I wanted to do Apocalypse Now, they said no. And so I found myself, if I wanted to make it, I had to sort of try to borrow the money myself, which is the only thing I did. I mean, I don't have a ton of money. I'm able to borrow money, of course, and I did, and I'm glad I did, because what I want out of it is, if just some of you feel inspired by doing something about this world we live in, so our kids have a better world than it looks like they're going to get. That's what I want. Well, they all because I took them out of school. Whenever I had a rule, whenever I went away to work on something more than 10 days, I pulled my kids out of school and brought them with me and stick them in any school that there was. My little Sophia was put in a Chinese school when she was 5. She did not speak Chinese, but they got the idea, and they all just like a team of Chinese acrobats. The kids were around movie making all the time, so they learned about movie making. And what I tell them is what I would tell you is you're unique. So whatever work you do, you should do it, make it personal, because there's Everyone here is a million to the one shot. There's no two of you. There's no two of you. So because of that, if you do creative work, which I recommend you do, because in the future we're going to make a lot of robots do all the toil, and we're just going to play together because that's when we're so creative. And if that's the case, make your work personal, because then there'll be nothing else like it. That's what I've tried to do. I mean, this movie has a lot of personal. It's got every movie I ever loved in it. My father always said, he was a composer. He always said, steal from the best. No, they say, what is that line that they say? They say, poor artists borrow, great artists steal. I don't know who said that. But it's true that we are on the shoulders of such extraordinary, talented people who came before us. I mean, in this country, I can name the wonderful, exciting people like John Schlesinger and Tony Richardson and John Osborne. I mean, it's rich. It's rich with heretics, but it's also the young are equally talented, more talented, because the young people are always an improvement over the previous generation. That's what the human situation does. So it's I think we're in a point in the world. The world has got a lot of trouble. A lot of people are worried about it. But if we could understand who we really are, which is what this movie is trying to say, there's nothing we can't solve, I don't believe. And that's a very hopeful thought.
I think they should see Megalopolis, and then I should see Megalopolis again.
Well, it's one thing about, those of you who may have seen Apocalypse Now, there's certain movies that you get more out of when you see it another time. It's I read somewhere that James Joyce, when he wrote Finnegan's Wake, he said, I'm going to make this book so full of stuff and so difficult to understand that it's going to sell for 100 years.
There you go.
Yeah, so thank you so much for
Thank you.
coming, and I hope you enjoy it.